Now you're live, you can begin.
Good morning, everybody. I am Deborah Goldenberg Phillips. I tend to go by my maiden name of Goldenberg, so I know a couple people had questions about what my real name was. And I welcome everybody to this first meeting of this session for the Dewey Beach Climate Committee. I hope everybody that's a committee member has received the agenda and has had an opportunity to review the minutes that Dave Davis put together for September 8th. As we begin the meeting, if we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'd like to do a roll call of our members. And as I do so, if each of you would also tell us a little bit about yourselves. So Kelly?
Yes, my name is Kelly Baxter. My most relevant experience would be in grants, reading and reviewing. 30 years ago, I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency in hazardous material planning, and we worked with FEMA and did local planning for chemical emergencies. And we had grants from across the country. I worked at the federal level. And from different regions, they would apply for grants and we would review. So that would be my most direct, relevant experience. And then I did some other grant approval and writing in philanthropy areas.
Well, thank you. And Dave Davis?
Hi, everybody. I've been a resident or an owner of property in Dewey since 2007. I've been on various committees and headed the Climate Change Committee for the prior 2 years. And I'm working remotely these days, so I'll be doing all my visits, through Zoom here. But I'm looking forward to participating.
Thank you. And Dave was the prior chair of this committee for the last session. Courtney, if you could introduce yourself, please. Courtney is virtual, and can she hear us?
I see chat coming in.
Is on through chat.
Maybe somebody could read the chat.
She
Okay.
said she's on a flight and she has limited connectivity, so
Very
probably
good.
can't really join.
Well, thank you for at least participating. Stacy?
Hi, I'm Stacy Hanna. I am a Dewey owner as well since, I believe, 2018. And my education, I have a master's in telecommunications. I previously held the office in regulatory, so a lot working with public utility commissions and, filing of federal and state items. And so that's primarily the role that I feel like aligns with this climate change. And I did disaster preparedness, created all the policies for that kind of thing. And so that's where I feel like I align a little bit here. But this is a fabulous committee and one of the committees that I believe can do the most impact for the residents here. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And Mary?
Hi, good morning. Sorry I couldn't be there. I was hoping to make it, but I overcommitted myself as usual. My husband and I have been living in Dewey since the 90s, and we just recently renovated our home and sold our house in Virginia. We're from the DC area. And now we just live here in Miami Beach. We have quite an impressive group here. I don't have any relevant experience. However, I do live in Miami Beach in the winter, and they are always dealing with climate change and flooding issues. And we certainly had our own drama as we were building our house and trying to deal with water and climate, and really have been wanting to get invested in the town for a long time. So when I saw this email come forward, I was so excited to finally find something that I was really interested in. So I look forward to being there in person for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And incidentally, if anybody's wondering, I'm doing this in alphabetical order of last names. So if you're wondering how I'm going back and forth, that is my method. Liam?
Hi, everyone. My name is Liam McDermott. I'm a sophomore at Virginia Tech studying civil engineering. And a lot of I don't know what I want to do yet, but a lot of my interests align with what's going on in this committee. Sea level rise, really any infrastructure near the coast is what I'm interested in. So, yeah, that's why I'm here.
Welcome. Gary?
Sure, I'm a commissioner. I'm not actually part of the committee. I'm the liaison from the town council to the committee. Just by way of background, I've been on the town council since 2016. Before that, I was on planning and zoning. And I was part of the comprehensive plan development group. The most recent one, I guess, was approved, I think, in 2018, but all of the preparatory work for that was pre-2016, as I recall. So I'm, offer myself as a resource. I, do have a lot of experience and a fair amount of background in trying to understand what's in our town code with respect to preventing flooding and flood damage reduction. So, and hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that tonight.
Thank you. Gary is a wealth of information who tends to have his hands in all kinds of aspects of Dewey's functioning. So I appreciate your being here this morning. Dave, Thomas?
Good morning, everybody. I am a 73-year-old retired attorney, and I got a master captain's license as my retirement hobby to sail. I've been staying on a sailboat here in Dewey since the 90s as a liveaboard second property, but 24 years ago, I bought a condominium unit on Reed Street, which is where I got up this morning and have been spending the last days getting the sailboat ready. I guess the most recent relevant thing to the committee is that last month I was promoted to become the legislative director of the National Boating Federation. And that was after having for almost 15 years been the legislative director for the Chesapeake Bay Yacht Clubs Association, 100 yacht clubs in 5 states in the District of Columbia, including Delaware and all the states that Delaware borders. So yacht clubs and marinas have a similar issue to Dewey in that they're almost by definition waterfront properties that are affected by sea level rise, climate change, and so you get into waterway improvement funds, much like the municipality would be involved in trying to get grant money to get assistance to either adapt or mitigate or defend against the effects of climate change in a proactive way.
Thank you. Andy?
Hello, I've been a property owner since 2000 and living here full-time for 5 years since I retired. Was a teacher, high school science, mainly environmental science, and my master's degree program was in environmental biology. And I worked while I was teaching half-time and then half-time as the county school yard habitat teacher specialist under NOAA BWET grants and wrote grants for that program anywhere from $100 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm very interested in this topic just in general, but have some experience with it as well. Thank you.
So my background is I am a practicing attorney, but not in the environmental field. Back when I was a research biologist and in environmental work, at one point I worked for EPA, I worked for National Outstanding Waters at the Department of Interior, and did some work publishing at the Woodland Conference many decades ago. My interest in this area is that I have been coming here since I was about 1 year old, and I'm a property owner as of 2016. As I see major changes in the Dewey and Rehoboth areas, my interest level led me to being part of the committee chaired by Dave last year. So thank you for allowing me to chair. I want to make sure everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes that Dave Davis prepared from the September 8th, 2023 meeting. Did everybody have a chance to do so? Is there a motion to adopt those minutes?
I would like to discuss the minutes for a second.
Okay.
I did have the opportunity to see them this morning. I looked at the video of the last meeting in September, and at the end, I believe it had been said that items A, B, G, H, I, and J had been voted thumbs up for further attention. B, I believe, had to do with whether things in the V zone should be treated how the A zone and V zone properties should be treated alike or not. And that might be the one that got dropped out, so that there are 5 left here as A through E. Each of the items that was out of the 10 that were not passed were either tabled or when they were given a thumbs up, there was also the idea that they should be referred to a specific committee for further evaluation in the town on the idea that this committee had no expertise, kind of a thing. I know that the Freeboard proposal did go to code review, and I see where their minutes are among our minutes now on the town website, but it morphed into not an increase in the Freeboard in the 100-year floodplain, but to raise it 1 foot. And that's where I believe Dave Lyons is now looking into it. And at the last meeting, I had questioned, well, what about the 1 foot as opposed to 18 inches, 2 feet, 3 feet? And just before I came down, I thought it was extremely instructive to see the April 1st meeting in Lewis, where they've been dealing with the same issue. And George, Miles, and Burr had done a consultancy, and they go into length as to what the impact and the consequences of an 18-inch elevation as opposed to a 3-foot elevation would be. The clear inference being that the 3 feet is the better, more proactive way to go and has a lot to be said for it. So that's my concern. I go back to, in my days in practice, one time I was at a hospital and there was a sign in the Office of Medical Records, and it said, "A hospital without a Department of Medical Records is like a clock without hands. It runs but tells nothing." And so I found when I was able to look at the things on the website or the Dropbox, that was actually very useful. I mean, there was an interesting outline that hadn't been
So what I want
populated.
to do, because we've got, and your information is very useful and very helpful.
So I'd like to get a copy of the Dropbox materials, but that's my comment about, I'm concerned that the minutes needed some work as to where they were going to be sent and what were the ones that were tabled, because I hadn't seen I haven't seen the agenda for that last meeting.
So I'm just going to tell you, I'm looking back at my notes from that meeting, and I do see that A, B, G, H, I, and J were deemed worthy of council giving greater consideration, and that was approved. What I would suggest then is that we table the adoption of the minutes for purposes of going back and reconsidering, and we'll have that for consideration at the next meeting if that works for everybody.
I second that.
I do want to ask if there's somebody that's willing to take notes for us and prepare the minutes for the meetings. Is there somebody willing to do that for us? If we could all not volunteer at once.
I'm electronically challenged and I don't even use a smartphone and I've never operated a QR code. So I was born in the wrong century.
Yeah, right now I have no Word on my computer.
I
and
don't
my
either.
Google
I just
Docs-
got this, just got
My
this.
Google Docs account is,
Is-
I'm not sure what's happening, so I can't commit to typing anything.
Is there a member that is virtual that is willing to be taking notes and prepare the minutes for our meetings hereafter?
Deborah, I'm happy to prepare your minutes for this meeting if we want to.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I will take care of it this time and we'll worry about maybe an official secretary next meeting. If that helps
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I appreciate that, Kate. So the purpose of the committee, I sent around the statement that Gary had provided to me on the Climate Change Committee with the focus and objectives. Has everybody had an opportunity to review that?
Deborah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure we stay on agenda. We need to adopt our agenda.
Yes, please. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda that I had circulated, please?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. The agenda is
And
adopted.
You have to call the question. Just make sure all is in favor.
Is everybody in favor of the agenda?
Make sure everyone
Are there-
unmutes.
Is
Yep.
there any objection? And those of you who are virtual, please make sure that you unmute. With no objections, the agenda is adopted. I want to talk, as this meeting is for the purpose of getting us started and for organizational purposes, I wanted to tell you that I believe future meetings should be roughly 1 hour. It seems that weekends are probably the best time to accommodate those that are working, those that are in school, and the mornings tend to be better than later on. I have been told that the lifeguards have the use of the building early in the mornings, and so for at least summertime meetings, we will probably begin at 10:30. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any oppositions to 10:30 on Saturday for future meetings? That having been said, I would contemplate that we will have a meeting roughly every 3 months. Does that sound like that would work for everybody?
Yes.
With that in mind, I want to discuss the dates that we can consider having that meeting. I'm going to send out some dates that I believe would be appropriate, but I'm looking at the end of June, beginning of July. I will need to consult the town's website to make sure the calendar is available for the dates that would be set. And of course, the virtual opportunity is going to continue. In terms of posting materials, we had been using Dropbox. There seems to have been some challenges for people accessing that. I've learned this morning that we can use the town repository for that. If anybody has documents they wish to have considered, I ask that you provide those and that we include Kate in those so that we can make sure that they get properly put on the Dewey site for public access when we need to do so. In terms of the expectations of the committee, this is to evaluate, make recommendations for the town to consider of what changes may need to be made or ideas that they should consider in light of the fact that the committee is looking at all of the changes that are happening to our area and of course to pretty much every place in the country as a result of the flooding that's occurring with climate change. So the focus is going to be making sure that we look at what needs to be there. How do we keep the public informed? What would be the impact on our property owners? And of course, making specific recommendations to the town of things that they may wish to consider, such as Dave has pointed out, we discussed September 8th of 2023 at the last meeting, where we made specific considerations for them to consider. At this point, I want to ask Gary to address RASCL. For those that are unfamiliar with RASCL, it is the Resilient Sustainability Communities League, and it is the acronym RASCLE. And I'd appreciate, Gary, if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I included a few slides in the materials for the meeting today. And the slides are from the most recent RASCL Summit, which took place a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, excuse me. And what it shows here is that this is a very broad-based organization within Delaware. You have major organizations at the state level that are involved. You have nonprofits that are involved. And then there are a number of university partners as well. And, you know, the overall purpose of this is to support Delaware communities, just like Dewey Beach, in, you know, taking the actions that are necessary to build or maintain a sustainable and resilient community. The group I think to focus on here is their what they call their project guidance group. And that does provide technical assistance to municipalities and others like Dewey Beach in developing their plans for sustainability and resilience. And as you can see from the last slide, we have engaged with them in the past. And the point here is I think we need to re-engage with this group again, you know, and come up with, as we come up with additional ideas for strategies and actions that can be pursued by the town. To work with the project guidance group of RASCL in pursuing some of those. And they can be very helpful, not only developing the ideas and the plans for those kinds of strategies, but also some help in identifying some funding sources for those as well. Dave Davis was involved in it. Dave, if you want to add anything to that, here's your opportunity.
No, I think you've covered it well, Gary. Thanks.
Okay, good.
So could one of you please explain how, at least during the course of the last year, the information from RASCL has been considered by Dewey Beach and or by this committee?
Well, we had presentations from RASCL, at least one, maybe two presentations from one or more of the key players within the group. We have for many years worked with the, their name is escaping me at the moment, but the Center for the Inland Bays. We worked with them for a long time on a number of projects, but there are other organizations like that that are very valuable to work with as well. But again, it was presentations, it was interchange. Dave identified some contacts at the University of Delaware that we worked with in developing the initial recommendations. So we just need to re-engage with those partners. I think probably, this is just my idea, share with them the priority recommendations that came out of the committee last year, and begin to get some conversation going on how we might pursue some of those in the most productive way.
And do you have contact information for how we can contact them, participate in their meetings, things of that nature?
Yeah, we'll have to dig that out. There's probably some of it in the RASCL materials, but we can pull some of that together and get that out to you.
I think it's also important that we advocate for these initiatives that they're doing. Like I believe the Center for the Bay, they had a volunteer event where they were doing plantings out. And, you know, we should be engaged enough to them to know in advance before, rather than seeing it from the backside after it's already happened, and work with our marketing committee to, you know, send that out to our, you know, the people of Dewey so that they know, like, they can contribute and be a part of this. But I think it's important that we advocate what they're doing and communicate that to Dewey as well. I was saddened to see, I didn't even know it happened, and I was like, oh, I would have volunteered for that. So
what I'm hearing is part of our public awareness, and
Yes.
certainly as part of what our committee is doing, that we need to have somebody looking into what it's doing regularly and letting everybody know so that the advanced opportunities to
Right.
participate are there. May I ask if you're willing to
Yeah.
make that connect?
Yeah.
That would be great. And so if you can maybe speak with Gary to get the contact information if you don't already have it, because that would clearly be one of our focuses, which is public awareness, so that
Yes.
we can have an overall impact on property owners and people in general.
Yes.
That would be great, thank you. I also noted, and Dave Thomas had provided to me a bulletin where there are opportunities for people to attend seminars. There was a seminar that a number of our committee members attended last year, and there is a free opportunity at the St. John's Reserve in Dover, Delaware on May 9th from 9 to 12, which is creating a flood-ready plan that I actually registered for myself this morning. And it is, as I say, it is free, and it may be an opportunity for our members and anybody else, as it is open, to attend and gather more information. If anybody's interested in that, please see me, and I'm happy to provide you with the link for that. I also see that on April 16th, the University of Delaware is doing a symposium on sustainability and climate change, and I can provide the link for that if anybody wishes to attend that. Should you end up attending either of these, please let me know so that we can find out what your learned information is and share it at our next meeting. I also am seeing that there has been a number of other seminars that prior members have attended, and should you wish to share that information at a future meeting, I appreciate your letting me know what information you may wish to share so that we can incorporate that and actually make some progress from your learned information. At this time, I would welcome anybody raising any new business that you wish for our committee to address.
I don't have new business, but I have maybe new perspective. So just this past full moon, we had damage just north of our bridge to Bethany. So I know we talked about climate change, but right now we're in a solar cycle where the sun is at its highest peak of heat, which produces more solar flares, which also produces changes into our in the waves and like the movement, as you probably are aware. So it was actually the full moon that caused that damage. So no one expected a storm. No one expected, there was no weather alert that something was happening until it happened, right, on the full moon. And so I think that maybe we should, when we talk about climate change, it's really just a changing in our environment as more than just like weather related. It's solar related, it's moon related. It's just to provide perspective, because I think that's something that's important if we, know that these things are happening, and then, we can also advocate to, the Dewey people that this could happen.
So what I'm hearing is that we've got changes as a result of the solar system, which is overall impacting things, including our general climate and
Yes.
the wave movement. So how would you suggest that we, in incorporating the broader perspective that you've suggested, how would you suggest that our committee incorporate that in terms of active plans?
Well, I guess in our communication out to Dewey, are we expected to provide perspective on stuff is that part of our committee to do? I feel like I would have loved to know that was happening before it happened.
Is there ability to track, how is there a way to know who's tracking?
Well,
Is there a
fully-
NOAA, tracking app or something that we could
Yes.
incorporate in our, like tracking weather?
Yeah, there is
Maybe a good start would just be to keep it.
Well, let me look through and find out who is tracking this information. Yeah, so I can go through and pull out some information on that. It's just like it was unexpected, and that's like no one knew it was coming. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, it was big, it was huge. Like the waves were. I was on the beach at the time at sunset, and the water went from probably 40 feet away from me to like 10 feet away from me in a matter of 10 minutes. It was a big deal.
So I think, of course, that impacts overall climate change issues, which would definitely be part of the committee's consideration. And I think that you're finding some way of educating people as to how we learn that in advance, if at all possible, is something clearly that would be part of public awareness. Whether the committee itself
Yes.
would be a committee that needs to proactively take actions in that regard for recommendations to the town, it's unclear to me, but I welcome that greater information.
There's clearly flooding implications.
Right, yes.
And that's
And
why
I know
welcome
that the
target.
town manager, Bill, sends out notices that storms are coming and whatnot. So, I mean, the full moon is only once a month, so. But, so we know when that's gonna happen. So there's that good news, but maybe we just need to like look at when the tide's coming in and when that full moon occurs, what implications could happen from that.
And certainly that would be part of, as it impacts the climate overall,
Yes.
what that information should be used to do to make our recommendations to the town. So if you have information in that regard that you find that is a source of being able to educate the public,
Right.
please let us know. But again, with the focus of this committee, which is to figure out what recommendations we need to make, while that may be an influential part of it, as a consideration, we'll have to evaluate how.
I think it's just an education to the public, like this could happen.
So please let us know if you learn of some.
Yeah,
method
I'll
of
take an
tracking.
action item to research that.
Appreciate it.
Noah, yeah, I bet so.
And you mentioned the town manager, that he sends out these notices, so he may have some method of
Yeah.
that information being more publicly spread.
Well, maybe we just provide him whatever I come up with my research, and he can deem whether or not he feels it's something that needs to be communicated.
So why don't you at the next meeting bring back whatever research you're able to
Yeah.
find? Great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
If I may I make a comment?
Please.
I think one of the recommendations that we made last year was to work with the marketing committee in town to better educate the public as to, what the issues are and what we're doing to grapple with climate change. So I think it's a great idea that Stacy has to bring, new things to light about, things that affect it. And I think in working with the people in the marketing committee, we could put together some sort of maybe a regular, information share, just to keep, this in the public mindset and, continue to build awareness, right? That kind of thing.
So, Dave, it sounds like you've had some contact with that committee and maybe.
No. I think our recommendation, I forget which letter it was, but I believe one of the later recommendations from last year was to work with the marketing committee to get the word out through their efforts, or work, in tandem with them. So that's as far as we took it.
So, based on that, it sounds like this committee should be in contact with that committee chair and see where they are and how we may be able to work together.
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing? Is that?
Yeah, Deborah, it's just so far, this issue has not come onto the marketing committee's agenda so far. So this would be a new contact. It would be a new issue for them to deal with and to help this committee with.
Gary, would we have to go to the commissioners to, enable us to have that kind of discussion with marketing?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we basically approved the recommendations that came out of this committee. So
Oh, you did?
I think
Okay.
the path is open to go ahead and make
Okay.
that communication.
Okay.
So I guess we would, as this committee, we would prepare something for them to communicate out with? Or should we work with them on how we should interact with?
So what I'm thinking is perhaps you, and if Dave is willing to work with you, contact them and find out what may be the best way that we work hand in hand and to benefit both committees. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this seems to touch into the area where I've been confused, concerned, the interface between this committee and the infrastructure committee. And I see where Liam is a civil engineering student. Isn't a lot of the defense adaptation or mitigation that we're trying to consider in a proactive way really getting into bayside and oceanside water infrastructure? And
Dave, would you mind if I interrupt you?
sure,
You're right. There's certainly a connection, but there's a connection with this committee, with Charter and Code, with P&Z, with infrastructure. These committees are all interrelated in some way or another. I think the infrastructure committee is much more focused on specific projects. I think this committee can identify the issues, begin to suggest some potential solutions, and make recommendations that could then be considered by the commissioners, that could then be referred to at the infrastructure committee. So there's no duplication of effort. This committee is not assuming any kind of responsibilities that the infrastructure committee has traditionally held. It's really complementary and I think foundational to some of the issues and the strategies that infrastructure has to consider and pursue.
Okay, so back to the question at hand, which was this committee working with the marketing committee, what is our objective? That's the actual question that we're asking right now. So in the research that I said I would do, I would research the lunar cycle, how it impacts with that. But I think obviously when we work with the marketing committee, we want to tell them a bigger picture than that, right?
And so I'm seeing that this would be the preliminary steps to try to explore how can we work with them, which would be in furtherance of one of the goals that was recommended by the committee last year.
yes.
And so I'm thinking that the first steps on this would be, if you're willing, Dave Davis and Stacy, to contact the marketing committee, find out what those steps may be, so we can understand better for this committee how to.
I can tell you right now, they're going to say, what is the information you want to share? That's what they're going to say. Like, so you want us to communicate, then what is it that you want to communicate? And that's what I'm saying right now, we need to decide what that is. And I think it should be part of what the consultants found out, that we approved to move forward with, and then any other little taglines like the research that I was, but is there anything else that we want to communicate to?
Well, clearly in those items A through J at the September meeting, the marketing committee was specifically mentioned a few times.
Yeah, they're mentioned, but we haven't provided it to them. We haven't said, here, marketing committee, these
No,
are the
I
items.
haven't seen what those items were on the agenda because I've never seen a copy of the agenda. And the minutes here do not refer to that or mention that at all.
Dave Davis, can you chime in on that, please? Sorry.
No problem. I just stepped away for a second, but I heard everything. Well, we can certainly make the agenda available to Dave if he'd like to read it. But my sense is that if we want to pursue the recommendations that were made for last year, that's kind of its own separate track from, some of the discussions we're having now. If you want to reevaluate and come up with a new set of recommendations instead, but, it would be basically leaving the others, or revisiting the whole issue at this point. If the minutes don't fairly represent the content of the last meeting, that's my fault. But I do think that, we're sort of starting anew here and we're trying to figure out and get our footing. So whichever way we decide to go, I'll support and help.
It sounds to me like we're all agreeing that communicating, having some sort of communication to the marketing committee from this committee is important. And we just don't know what that looks like yet.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel prepared to do that, but if we, if we spend this time figuring out what that looks like, it's just such an obvious thing that we would communicate with it. I would have started with calling them, but you seem to know, that they're just looking for information from us. They don't have anything.
I mean, they're
that they've
marketing.
done.
They're like,
Yeah, so, maybe we just, between now and the next meeting, come up with, how we'd like to communicate, what that format looks like, and work with the marketing committee. Because we certainly, just touching on the few issues we have information we want to share.
right.
Deborah, just
Yes,
a comment.
please.
You might want to just come back to the simple statement that came out of the recommendations, and that is begin preparing a series of tools to further the general public's understanding of the problems and what the town is doing to address them. So, you need to talk about what the problems are, and then what the town is already doing to address them. And that's the kind of information that needs to be provided to the marketing group. And then they can help you better be able to communicate those things or suggest some strategies that would be helpful in communicating them. I have a question, and it's a question for this group as well as the general public. How much understanding is there of that the fact that most of the property in Dewey Beach south of Houston Street is in a federal flood zone? And, that needs to be considered. And how many people understand exactly what flood zone they're in and what that means? If they're in the AE6 flood zone, what does that mean? That's the kind of information I'm not sure that the general public is aware of, and I don't know the extent to which members of this committee are well versed in all of that sort of information. Because I think having that basic understanding relates to a lot of the work and the kinds of issues that this committee needs to consider and then make recommendations on.
And Gary, how is that information accessible so that we've got a factual basis upon which to rely?
Well, one of the things I had asked you to include, and you did include in the documents for today, is simply a flood map. And I think it's worthwhile making sure that people understand what that really is about. And as I said before, if you're in the AE6 flood zone, what that means is that if you're building a property, if you're going to build a building in that, and your property is in that AE6 flood zone, that 6 refers to the base flood level elevation. So that you need to begin building that property at the base flood elevation. The first floor has to be elevated to the base flood elevation, plus 1 foot of freeboard. That's freeboard is an additional safety factor. And hopefully, we can get a better common understanding of that. Dave Thomas mentioned earlier that, we have been pursuing the committee's, this committee's initial recommendation of increasing the freeboard. It's at the Planning and Zoning Committee. But I have to say what surprised me was when they began to talk about it, there seemed to be some lack of understanding about what that would mean for building a building. And how does it relate to the town's 35-foot height limit, which in fact is not the height limit in the area of Dewey Beach that we're talking about that's in the federal flood zone. It's really 32 feet from that base flood elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard. I'm throwing a lot out at you at this juncture, and maybe too much, but we need that kind of basic level of understanding so that we can pursue some of these things. I think the town's probably going to end up at 3 feet additional freeboard. And it's to build in a safety factor. It's to look down down the road and to understand that there's a very high probability that sea level is going to continue to rise, and we're going to need to build in as much safety factor as we can to keep as many properties out of the floodwaters as possible. And we're beginning to see much more emphasis from FEMA that they would like to move communities in that direction to get them to require, as much as possible, buildings that are built to be built at those safe levels. And it also affects our flood insurance, our ability to be part of the federal flood insurance program. So it's a lot of information. A lot of it's basic, but I think there's a basic level of understanding that we have to kind of work from here, and then communicate as much of that or as little of that, whatever seems to be most productive. Begin to communicate that to the public with the help of the marketing section. I think that was the point of what we were talking about with the public education campaign.
Does the marketing committee have a format that already exists, that how they communicate? Like, can we sort of put it in a format that's really digestible for them, and they just put it out in an email? How do they normally share information? So we can take these complicated things and maybe parse it out in a series of emails or something. I don't know how they normally communicate with.
They have a meeting every couple months.
They do. They meet very, very regularly, and they would use they have at their disposal a variety of communication strategies. Some of it could just be through the town website. Could be emails. There could be a special program. I mean, they've started a new program called the Bloom Project, which is similar to projects in other municipalities, which is basically just to encourage support from members of the community in beautifying the town, and paying for some planters that will contribute to the beauty of the town. But that's, I think there was an email that went out on that. Kate is probably a lot more familiar with the strategy that was used, but I think you need to kind of match up the information that you want to communicate with the strategies that marketing seems to think are most productive for doing that.
Well, and back to what you were saying, Deborah, is how can we get the information you just referred to? What's the best way for me to research, the information on this map that we could put it in a format that we could share with them?
I can put together some general materials for the committee if the committee agrees that would be helpful. These would be materials from FEMA. It would certainly be reference to section 101 of our town code, which is the flood damage reduction section of our code, and sets forth the requirements. And I think this partly relates to a need to put together maybe in a table version some of the requirements within the flood hazard areas. If you're in an AE zone, what does that mean in terms of requirements that you have to meet? If you're in a higher flood zone, the FE flood zone, those are generally the areas that are close to the ocean. The requirements are much more stringent. And I know the committee dropped out the notion of applying those more stringent FE standards to the rest of the flood zone properties. But I think it might be worthwhile if I could put together a table that showed you a comparison of what the requirements are in the A zones compared to those in the more stringent FE zones, that you could then begin to understand what the requirements are, understand how they compare, and then you might even want to come back to that initial recommendation of what would it mean if you were to apply those more stringent requirements in the FE zone to the A zones, and then make a recommendation based on that. That may be a good idea, may not be a good idea, but it's a way, I think, of both better understanding what the requirements are, what they mean, and then coming to some productive action potentially, or for recommendation on how to apply or whether or not to apply some of those more stringent standards to some of the other flood properties.
Well, I think those practical applications are a great way to get the community to start to think bigger picture. Like when someone starts to realize it's going to affect their construction, they're going to start paying more attention in a more global way. So I think it's a great place to start in terms of communicating with.
It's also not just new construction. So my house was built in 1936 and I'm much higher on my street than my neighbors, but all these new buildings are coming in at a higher level and there's this one little cute house and there's nothing wrong with it, but now it's in a lake. It's literally, we never had flooding in Clayton until all these new homes came in. So, I just want to say, like, some of these people are not going to be happy with this information, that things are changing and could affect, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just looking back at what you read earlier, Part E, Public Education Campaign. That's where he had written about a series of tools, public's understanding. So looking at like, what are the causes and what are some of the problems and what are some of the solutions? It seems like that's what we're looking at compiling for people. And it would be nice to have a few words with maybe a link, like that the solar cycle and the moon cycle affect flooding.
Yeah.
And then you put a link with that information if people are like, oh, I didn't know about that. Or like permits. I've been doing permit stuff for our HOA for years, complaining and never realizing why. And I don't see her, yep. Dawn's still up there. And finally, in the last few months, I realized and learned why we have the permit thing in Dewey. So if something that's short and to the point, but shows where to get more information. So if you're a builder, you know to go here. If you're just a homeowner that wants to find out what's going on, you can look at some of the things that have happened in Dewey and some of the reasons that there's concern about climate change.
So I want to address everything that, first off, I apologize for not introducing Dawn. Dawn, would you please let everybody know that you're here and tell us about yourself? I do apologize.
No, that's certainly fine. Good morning. My name is Dawn Hanks. I'm the building official for the town of Dewey Beach. And so I have sort of unmuted myself after listening to all of your fine discussion. However, what I just would like to bring out is that the town, yes, the majority of the town is in what's called a special flood hazard area that has special needs when it comes to water. Yet the whole town has needs when it comes to water. So once a year, I am required as the floodplain administrator designee, and I send out an email and or it's an actual mailing that states that this information, we're here in a flood zone. You as the property owner, you want to have more information, please contact me. I am more than willing to have scheduled consultations with folks to help explain what their property, what kind of zone they're in, what kind of requirements that FEMA has for your particular property. It is, as Commissioner Persinger stated, it's a very complicated subject, yet it is attainable. And so as a result, the goal is to have life safety, property safety. So if folks are willing to get or want to have more information on their personal property, certainly have a consultation with me or schedule a consultation with me. And there's an awful lot of construction going on, but I can provide a plethora and a tremendous amount of information that FEMA would like to get across to the community. FEMA is not here to not have people build in a flood zone. That's just not going to be practical, and it will always take place. Yet to elevate the homes so that when flooding does occur, and it will occur, then this is where you folks in your research on climate change, how the flooding will take place, and what warnings that we can get to give the folks ahead of time very important for your committee. So thank you.
Thank you. So based on the information that's been shared, the first thing I'm hearing is that for us to know with specificity what marketing may require without giving them information, we would probably benefit by having at least somebody contact them to understand what information, the level of specificity, how their procedures work, so that we know that when we're ready, we can do so. Is there somebody willing to make that contact?
I can do it.
Great, thank you. And then what I'm also hearing is that Gary's going to put together this chart, and that is something that he can discuss and we can review before the next meeting, which perhaps will help us to focus on how we go from there, how we implement a lot of the information. As far as what Dawn has provided to us, we now know that we have a person that's accessible. And when we're providing the ultimate information, perhaps through marketing, a link to her, with that being part of how we keep the public aware, seems like it would be very helpful. Is that summarizing where we are?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, is there any additional new business before we set up our next meeting where we consider those pieces of information that will be provided?
Well, just to touch on what is Dave, right? Dave was saying, it sounds like there's a potential to also do that with other committees, you know, and as a new committee, I'm sure all of this was under one umbrella previously, but now that we're our own committee, you know, we might want to consider a liaison with I forgot what the title of that committee.
Well, there's the infrastructure committee, there's the code committee, there's planning and zoning, but also there is the floodplain administrator and the building
Maybe that
official, who is
relationship.
Dawn, who you just heard of. And I think what Gary will put together would be very helpful and a starting point. My comment is that I was very gratified to read prior to today's meeting the consultancy that South Bethany arranged on the part of George, Miles, and Burr, the engineering consultants who are actually working with Dewey as to the new town hall and police department. They have a climate change committee. And so their charter, I think, is very similar to our charter, the first words of which are a comprehensive plan. So they put together a very interesting document as to what the folks in South Bethany who are concerned about climate change for their municipality
Is that something we
might be
can share
doing.
with the committee?
And I know that one of the recommendations, for example, is to keep up with what ACT, the Association of Coastal Towns, and SCAT, the Sussex Community Association of Towns, is doing. I'd like to get a better handle on how you do that, since it's difficult. They don't really have a website. How do you see their minutes? What are the recommendations and activities that they have had? There's also a Delaware League of municipalities, and that is where actually there is a state mandate that a municipality like Dewey have a climate change vulnerability type assessment, and you know, what are you going to do in terms of adaptation and mitigation, with interestingly a 10-year frame.
Can you share that document with us?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it'd be-
you
I
know,
think the more information, the better at this point. You know,
Right.
And I think it's discovering where we overlap or where it's our job or someone else's, you know, we just find our space in that as
So,
similar to.
during the last committee, it became very clear that the entire country is under flood problems. And pretty much every municipality, every government entity has its own form of a climate change committee of some nature. And everybody's kind of doing their own thing. I think it was Milton that has essentially rebuilt the town. They did a fairly extensive, comprehensive program before they made various choices of where their priorities would lie. Would they continue to pave roads that keep getting flooded, or would they just deem them permeable areas and call them parkland and let them go? Would you allow for additional building in areas that you know are problematic? I mean, there were all these issues that were addressed. I personally spoke with the town manager in Bethany and met her along with a number of members of last time's committee at one of the seminars that we attended. And so we can look into trying to get a copy of their comprehensive plan, but it's important to understand that while there's similarities everywhere, we do need to focus on specifically how it's going to impact Dewey. And while the additional information from these various groups is very helpful so that we don't have to recreate the wheel,
Yes.
it's also important to understand
Stay
that we need to try to stay focused and narrow down exactly where we go from here. So perhaps, Dave, you can try to get a copy of the plan from South Bethany, if you'd like to do that.
It's on the, yeah, it's on the website. I'll guide you as to where the links are. And yes, Milton and Fenwick Island, those are all others. And my filter when I look at that is, does that apply to Dewey? Would that appear to apply to Dewey? Would that be something we might consider or think about?
Right.
And so those are all things that we kind of looked at last time. And then we came up through the University of Delaware having made specific recommendations to us to focus on the areas that had been selected as to how we were going to proceed.
And is that this chart? Is that this?
So that is that.
Okay.
What she is looking at is the letter from Delaware, from the University of Delaware, which was included in the information. It's a 3-page letter, which was February 27th of 2023, that talks about where our priorities are and their recommendations in that regard. That was then brought to our meeting, and that's how we prioritized the places that are listed in the not yet adopted minutes, which we are going to reconsider and make sure that they coincide with what is.
Not to drag this on, but has this already been decided, this keep, discard, or is that, there's a question mark, I wasn't sure. This has already been decided.
Some of them were tabled.
Okay.
So we prioritized, and those were in the minutes, which we're going to reevaluate which of their recommendations
Okay, that was
we
the
were
AB,
going to
okay.
be focusing on. So if you look at the drafted minutes, you will see that there were certain ones that were voted on and how the committee generally addressed those. So we'll have to revisit those to make sure that the minutes are consistent with what occurred. I did say that I would try to keep the meeting within the 1-hour time frame. And so with that in mind, what I want to find out is there any additional issue for today that people wish to bring up that we reconsider for the next meeting? If you have new business that you would like to have considered at the next meeting, I would appreciate your emailing me so that I can incorporate it into the agenda, which needs to be published in advance of the meeting for the public to have. And if there isn't any additional new business, is there a motion to adjourn?
Well, did we decide what the date of our next meeting was? I was hoping we'd have one in June and maybe one in August to kind of pick up the pace. And because we do have somebody who's a student at Virginia Tech who is off on the summer, I suppose, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll be in Dewey Beach from May 10th to June 10th. So if there's anything in that window, that'd be nice.
Yeah, that would be great if we could have you here.
What I will do, as I indicated when we started the meeting, is I will consider some dates, and then I would have to consult with the town's calendar. And from there, I can make sure that we will likely have a quorum. and then we can set the date. So I have to set the date sufficiently in advance that everybody has notice. Obviously, having as many people from our committee as possible attend is very important, but I can't give a date, we can't discuss and set it unless I consider the town calendar, and I would hope to be able to do so within the next week to two. Will that work for everybody? We had talked about doing something at the early part of, or sometime in June. Liam, with knowing your calendar, that you're going to be here, you said that that's May 10th to June 10th that you're in town? So
Yeah, that's right.
I'll take a look at the calendar and hopefully be back in touch with everybody in the very near future. I also have prepared a listing of all the committee members and their email addresses. I am happy to circulate that, and before I do so, I want to make sure that no one has an objection to their name or email address being part of the list that would circulate for everybody's information. So is there anybody that would prefer not to have their name and their email address as part of that? If so, and you're not comfortable letting me know in public today, you're welcome to let me know through an email. And if you do not get that listing, then the reason will be that there has been some opposition and I won't be doing that. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah, email is fine for me, and also my phone number and snail mail or whatever, you know.
Okay, so-
The more communication, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Is
It
there
makes
any,
for a team effort.
thank you. Is there anybody that publicly wishes to let me know that they do not wish their name to be, and their email address to be circulated? Okay, so I will give that a week before I do so to give people the opportunity to let me know by email if you do object but don't wish to be heard today on that. And with that in mind, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I have a gift for my chairman here. It's a book that I've found influential by John Englander, Rising Sea Level and the Path Forward. And it has an interesting download, Keeping Your Assets Above Water Checklist. And I encourage you, you can see where I got it from the Interlibrary Public Library. And it's got the ISBN number and all that. It's a great book, and it talks about all manner of things, including solar.
Okay.
So I will go on and I'll send a copy of this by email to everybody.
Yeah.
And then
Thank
we
you.
don't have to copy it. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
John Englander, he's an oceanographer.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
everyone.
attendance.
All in favor?
Thank you all.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Any objections?
No.
Thank